Welcome to another episode of Coffee Talks. We are here at Inbound with Phil Nottingham from Wistia. Hello, everybody. So today we're talking about episodic video content. And of course, we're big believers. This is an episode of a video series, right? But Phil, you're going to talk at Inbound about episodic content. And you guys are doing this amazing Brandwagon series. Do you want to tell us a little bit about what's Brandwagon and why episodic video content?
Yeah, sure. So essentially, Wistia got to a point a few years ago where we'd done pretty well with our general acquisition strategy. We're getting traffic, getting leads, that kind of stuff. And the challenge then was, well, okay, how do we get to the next level to grow our brand? And we then invested in, as a lot of companies do, in like an ad campaigns. Mm-hmm. We did some good video ads and we did some display and like this big campaign, spent a lot of money on it. And the results were not to be seen.
Flat.
Exactly. And we sort of thought about this, and maybe I wonder why that is. And then the next sort of few months later, a few drinks down, Chris Savage, our CEO, was chatting with Adam Lusagor from Sandwich Video. We had this idea of, why don't we do 3 ads for 3 different budgets, $1,000, $10,000, $100,000. We then went out and made this documentary just because it seemed like a good opportunity to make a kind of film that we thought would be cool. And what we noticed when we released this film last year that was called 1 to 100 is that our brand search volume went up massively.
Wow.
About 10% over the course of a couple of months. And we were seeing people spend a lot more time on our website and generally engaging with the brand a lot more. And we thought, hello, we're on something here.
That's great.
So the thinking is really that ultimately what we've thought about for a long period of time, for the last 100 years, is that awareness leads to affinity. So that if you do advertising, more and more people will kind of get to know you, and then they'll like you, and then this will bring this great thing where lots of people talk about you, search for you, and you get all the wonderful things you want out of brand. But in this world where we're all filled with ads all the time, and it's just this crazy environment, that doesn't really apply anymore. And actually, brand affinity is far more important than just brand awareness. And we think that the way in which you can market for brand affinity, obviously brand affinity can be built just from a great product and all that kind of stuff, but the thing that you can do to market for that is episodic video content. And the reason for that is because it's about giving people entertainment and engagement that they can spend time with. And when somebody's spending time with your brand, when they're spending time with your message or content, that's when they start to build that affinity, that preference, that kind of connection with you. And that's the kind of thing that drives word of mouth, it drives purchasing intent, and all the important things that we expect to get from brand. So that's kind of why we're investing in this. And Brandwagon is really our kind of first official iteration of this strategy, where we are going to be building a lot of fun, and we're doing it every kind of week or every couple of weeks. We're releasing a new episode that is very much like a traditional TV talk show with some fun little snippets in between, kind of like Jimmy Fallon or whatever. And we're doing it for the audience of like the very specific audience of marketers who are kind of trying to work out what to do next. We're in a world, particularly in acquisition, where people are kind of not sure how to apply and what to do, and we're kind of saying, okay, well, we're going to explore this topic in a show called Brandwagon. And it's really designed to capture the interest of that audience, knowing that if we capture conversation with that audience, that will lead to further conversations about us and our products that will eventually raise that kind of revenue number.
And you mentioned a couple of things. I have a follow-up question because it's very interesting when we talk about measuring success with video. That's always a big topic for us, and we're big ROI people and HubSpot and all these other things, but brand affinity, it's not the same. How do you measure that? And you mentioned like people subscribing, people staying longer. Do you have specific metrics, or how do you measure all of that?
Yeah, it's a great question. So I think there's 3 kind of general metric areas that really matter with brand affinity. The first one is like time spent. So that's the kind of way in which brand affinity is built, someone actually spending time with you. So we've started setting goals instead of like number of views, our goals are all around hours watched and the amount of people who are like spending time with it. We'd rather have one person watch 10 hours of content than 10,000 people watch 1 minute or whatever.
Yeah, you want that person
exactly.
if they watched 10 hours of content, right?
Exactly, because then they're talking about us to everyone, they're really spreading our message the way that 10,000 ad impressions does nothing.
Exactly.
So yeah, so that's kind of what we're going for, that really hard engagement with a smaller group of people. The second kind of metric is, as you mentioned, subscribers. So if somebody cares about what you're doing, they're going to give you their email address, you can build their email list, you can then start to build that relationship and communicate more formally with a group of people, and that's how you kind of build your fan base, is kind of the way we're describing it. And then the last kind of trailing metric of success is brand search volume. So the amount of people who are probably searching for you, showing that there's that intent to be interested in your brand and what you're trying to say and what you're kind of creating.
So before we were avoiding people searching for our name because that's like, okay, people that search for our name already know us, so we don't want to do that for SEO. It's like, okay, yeah, these keywords are fine, but it's our name, so we didn't achieve that. But now it's the reverse. It looks like when we're working on brand, affinity, what we're trying to do is we're trying to get more people to search for our name because someone told them about it or someone forwarded the email about Brandwagon and things like that, right?
Yes, exactly. I think there's a slight shift in a lot of the thinking about search, about sort of this latent demand that sits there, and our job is to meet it. Whereas actually, a lot of marketing now is about really generating that demand. And the same I think is true in like video distribution. So traditionally, video distribution has been around like, okay, we've got to get the content out there, get it in all these channels. And actually, I think the new strategy is about audience direction. So it's about bringing people to you and creating that demand for the kind of thing that you're creating. So we call this like market like a media company, because the model that we're applying is basically the same as Netflix or the Financial Times or the New York Times, who are kind of creating stuff, but ultimately they build this hub, this platform. They're trying to get people towards, bring in subscribers, and build that kind of fan base and those regular returning users over time.
That's awesome. How can a small company start with this? Because it looks like, again, I've been talking about video. We've been talking with Wistia, and we've been learning so much from Wistia, but at the same time, it's always hard. People think that video is expensive, video is hard, and we've been talking about how to demystify that whole thing. But how do you start with a video series? That seems like a bigger undertaking. So do you have any tips for small companies that want to start with this?
Sure, yeah. So I think the first tip I would have is get really specific with your audience. And the other kind of core point for a small company is your audience for your show, for your video series, is not the same as the audience for your customers. It has to be a very niche, like a subculture. And the strategy we describe this as like find your nerds. There is a small group of people, maybe only 5 of them, that really care about what it is that you do and what you talk about. And you need to work out some tangential interest that they have and create something about
and
that.
Make that grow from there.
And make that grow from there, because the word of mouth will trickle from that very small circle.
Is that why you created a sub-brand from Wistia to
Yes.
Brandwagon, and you're like making that grow? Because it's like you don't want to push to the same audience.
Yes.
You want to push to a specific audience and build that brand separately.
Exactly. So the Wistia product audience is perhaps more technical than the Brandwagon audience, right? It's people who need a certain solution that is kind of around a video hosting and CRM and kind of that more like technical marketing. The Brandwagon audience is going to be slightly more generic, perhaps more like social media marketers, people who are focusing on brand, who we've historically not spoken to as much, because we recognize that that group of people are the ones who are actually ultimately influencing the buying decisions of the people who we speak to from our customers.
Definitely.
So it is a very different audience. And I think small businesses, when they fail in this, is they don't go for a specific enough audience.
They keep selling.
They keep selling. They try and make it, we're trying to sell. But actually the point of Brand Affinity is that it is driven by word of mouth. And that means that you have to kind of focus on that. And it's a mental shift that I think a lot of businesses struggle with, because they're used to this kind of funnel, come in, convert. So it requires kind of letting go of that and understanding that your job is a bit more like a media company, and you're trying to
Build
create
audience.
this audience. Yes, exactly. And think of the content that you're creating like a product to promote. This isn't something that is designed to get more people using your actual core product. It's a new product line that you are building to meet the needs of an audience who are ultimately going to grow your entire brand and audience, which is the main thing to go after.
And that's a great point. And what are the difference with, again, a video series is just videos that are built for an audience, but how would you describe the difference between creating videos as a series to build your brand in comparison or different from creating a video to promote a product or a service? What are the differences in the actual video production?
Yeah, sure. So I think the key thing is like the goal and the audience. So when the goal is the conversion of some variant description, you're going to have something that's a little bit more action orientated. It's like, hey, here's the product, here's what it does, go and do this. Your action for content that you're creating that's for Brand Affinity is going to be around consuming more content. And your goal is to get people consuming as much as they can. So that means that the videos are necessarily going to be longer. They are not going to be having a specific conversion-oriented goal as much, but like get people to the next piece of content. And you're really trying to encourage consumption, encourage that kind of engagement and the connection that someone has with an audience.
So there has to be fun or entertaining or something that catches their attention and gets them to go dig deeper and go into the next episode And of course, Wistia channels can help with that.
And
right?
yeah, so it's the video should provide value in and of itself. It's not a means to an end. Whereas a product video is a means to an end. It's like educating someone in order that they can get value elsewhere.
Awesome.
This is like, it is a value, it is a product. That's what you should be doing.
Awesome.
And yes, of course, Wistia Channels is a product built to support exactly this execution, yeah.
Thank you, Phil. This has been great. Thank you, everybody,
so
for
much.
joining us, and take care.
Thank you.